Hey guys, Venomous here, and I got a brand new OTGT for you. Now, today I'm talking about Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII, okay? Crisis Core is pretty much the prequel to the famous RPG Final Fantasy VII. Now, it's been released on the PSP, a good while ago. Square Enix wanted to kind of expand the universe of Final Fantasy VII with all these different spin-off games, and Crisis Core being one of the big main ones, and the reason why is because it takes, instead of being the center character being Cloud in this game, the actual main character of this game is Zack, who is a minor character in the actual Final Fantasy VII game. Zack is the soldier, the character that that is part of Soldier, that inspires Cloud to actually become a part of Soldier and actually become a first-class soldier within that unit and stuff. And he develops a really strong bond with him, like the two connects, really well and stuff, and he ends up dying in Final Fantasy VII. Spoilers ahead if you haven't played this game already, but, Zack ends up dying in the original Final Fantasy VII, but in this game, this takes place a good amount of time before Final Fantasy VII occurs, and you actually get to spend time in the shoes of Zack and go through some of his adventures where he meets a lot of the characters that, are involved in Final Fantasy VII. The only characters he never really comes into contact with, he never comes in contact with Barrett, he never comes in contact with Sid, and I don't think he comes in contact with, actually no, everybody else he pretty much comes in contact with. He actually meets up with, Tifa, he meets up with, Yuffie, he meets Cloud, obviously. The other person he doesn't meet is Red 13. Red 13 he ever actually meets. But he comes in somewhat into contact with Vincent, but you never really see Vincent in the game. Like, he's pretty much running around the Shinra Manor, and he actually runs into his coffin, but he just sees him sleeping, and they never show Vincent. Then he just kind of closes the coffin, and that's that. So you can't really count that, But anyway, Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII. How good of a game is it, okay? It's an RPG, okay? It's kind of like an action-ish RPG with a little bit of Kingdom Hearts mixed into it as far as, like, controlling in real time, but it's not a full real-time, action RPG, because you actually, in real time, you move your character around and then you choose different actions of what your character you want them to do. You don't necessarily, like, slash with the X button and stuff. You choose an action, you could choose items, different spells or what you could do like that. Kind of like how, if I had to choose an RPG to describe it, a little bit like how Phantasy Star is, but less real-time control with it. Okay, because pretty much you scroll through a little bit of like a little kind of like sidebar or bottom bar that says attack, items, and different types of abilities and powers that you have. You click on it, you scroll with it with the L and R buttons on the PSP. You click on it, and he does the action, and that's pretty much how you do all the battles within the game. And the battles, are okay. Boss battles are a lot really tough, and like there's a lot of level difference between Zack, some of his enemies, and Zack and the bosses and stuff, and it could get pretty hectic at times. But after a little bit of grinding, not a lot, but a little bit, you'll actually be somewhat on par. But the only thing that sometimes gets annoying is that even though you're at a higher level than some of the enemies' attacks can still kill you in one shot. Like, there's this one enemy that looks like a bunch of little like gunballs jumping around and stuff, and they have this thing called Delta Attack, and if that hits you, you pretty much lose all your health, just clear cut, no arguments there. It's pretty crazy, and that gets a little bit annoying sometimes, and sometimes the bosses could do that sometimes. But once you figure out the kinks and stuff, and you do a lot of the side quests and stuff, they become a little bit more manageable. Now, the story, besides mentioning a little bit more about the story, without spoiling too much, is that it does take place, before Final Fantasy VII. You do get to meet a lot of the characters. You meet Sephiroth. You meet a lot of the Shinra staff and stuff. You meet also some other characters that Square Enix has made specifically for this game to actually expand upon the actual Final Fantasy lore. Okay, where you meet characters that don't appear in Final Fantasy VII, but maybe appear also in Dirge of Cerberus, and maybe also not Final Crisis. Forgot Before Crisis, Final Fantasy VII, which takes place, and is in the through the eyes of the actual Turks. You actually meet kind of different enemies of what you actually saw in Final Fantasy VII, but they've been redone and revamped and looked a lot more kick-ass than what they did in that game. So it's pretty cool. You go to a lot of locations that are in Final Fantasy VII that have some significance that don't necessarily have significance in this game, because it does take place before that storyline. but it's still cool to go back and actually see them in a fresh new take. And what is it? Besides that, overall it's a great game. A lot of people didn't like it. You know, a lot of Final Fantasy fans, you know, loved it because it's Final Fantasy 7. So a lot of other like gaming companies said that it was really good. Then you had some that really didn't like it because they thought that maybe there should have been a little bit more control, a little bit much more better handling with the actual battle system and how the fighting goes down and stuff, and the story as far as like the character motivations a little bit iffy at times. But me personally, I didn't have too much of a problem with that. I kind of just rolled with it a little bit, you know, because sometimes just, you know, inputting that little extra suspension of disbelief can make all the difference of how you enjoy a game, you know, rather than nitpicky about specific things, you know, that, you know, should deserve an explanation when you don't get one. But that's all hearsay, you know, not really that important. Overall, it's really good. I played it multiple times, to be honest with you, because you have a new game, you have a new game plus. You also have the ability to go back and check all the side quests that you didn't do. You know, you get to change the difficulty on specifically how you want to, you know, go about playing it. There's a lot of different summons and stuff from classic Final Fantasy games that are in this game that have these kick-ass cinematics when you call upon them. The one way that you do call upon certain things and like different like limits and stuff, they have this slot thing which could get a little bit annoying at times. That's totally random on certain aspects. Like there's been things online that talk about how the little slot, you know, device thing that they have on the side, I forgot the actual name of it at the moment, but you know, don't get too mad at me for it. But you know, this little slot thing there, where if certain numbers match up during the course of battle, sometimes you could do different limits, you could do different spells, you get certain power-ups, and even at times you could call a summon, you know, totally at random, which, you know, sometimes could suck, you know, instead of like actually, you know, having the ability to actually call a summon whenever you want. But you know, they do look cool when they do come out. Like you get this whole cinematic right before they attack the enemy, and it's pretty badass. Okay, so overall, this game is good. If you're a really big fan of Final Fantasy, or a big fan of Final Fantasy 7 in particular, you should definitely check this out to expand upon the story and what you know already about, you know, Final Fantasy 7. It's a great game. Definitely check it out. One of the better one of the better PSP games that are out there that I definitely recommend. Okay, the only ones that are as good as this one is Dissidia Final Fantasy and God of War Chains of Olympus. Okay, so definitely check this game out. I'll talk to you guys again real soon. Venomous out, and that was only the goddamn truth. Talk to y'all later.